Welcome to the Nametags Wednesday Q&A chat. I am super excited today to have John Brewer. John is a marathon legend. I think he said 150 marathons in a wheelchair. Had an accident back in 1973. We'll get the true total when we move along. But he's also an artist. He's a teacher. He's a guy who experiences life as well. And as you know, with these programs, we are basing our chats on the 4 S's of resilience, which are part of our name tags presentation. So as you hopefully remember, they are about self, situation, support, and strategy. So the question with self is, am I a victim or am I a survivor? The situation, is it overwhelming or is it a challenge? Support, am I alone or part of a team? And strategy, do I have one strategy or do I have many strategies? And I want to talk to John about self, about am I a victim or am I a survivor? And John had been a surfer, big time surfer before his accident and needed that outlet, which I'm thinking, and we'll get into this, was a bit of an artistic and athletic, a melding of the two. When he got in 1973, the longest wheelchair race, as he was saying, was about 222 yards. That tells you how long ago it was. It was in yards instead of meters. Now all Paralympic and Olympic races are based on meters. They are no longer, it's not the 220 and the 440, it's the 200 and the 400. So John, when you started racing, what did you use to race? What was your first racing wheelchair?
It was my everyday chair, actually. It was actually a sport model for everyday use, and basketball is really what was going on at that time.
How much did it weigh?
I don't recall, but I imagine they're around 50, 60 pounds.
How much does your racing wheelchair weigh now?
I don't know, about 9, 10 pounds.
9, 10 pounds.
You tell me.
The frame is, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, right. Frame without the wheels, I guess maybe 15,
20. 16, yeah, something under 20 pounds, definitely.
Yeah.
And so you were in a 50 to 60 pound wheelchair. And how did it work? When did you decide that you wanted to go into racing? Because you did go through a bit of a difficult period after the accident, right? Sort of depression, which people assume. How did you get out of that? And was sport the thing that got you out of it, or
I think it was a lot of it was anger too, and needing a physical outlet to relieve some of that frustration. Yeah, I don't know if you remember the first time you learned to tie your shoe, and freedom, I can go out, and play. It's like starting all over again. I learned to get dressed out of my wheelchair, all that business about independence. And I think the body is made to move. And I think we're happier when we are. They say people that use their hands are happier than people that do not. But it was right during his 70s. I was top of 73, so December 73. My first full year was 74. And the running boom of the 70s was just starting to take off.
What was that?
The running boom. There was a time in history where jogging was really, really popular. And
so is that what kind of brought you into racing? You saw these races starting to happen and decided.
I wanted to see what I could do out of a wheelchair. So I was a student at the time at the University of Utah, and I took every PE class I could: tennis, bowling, swimming. I wanted to see what I could do, from that. And then a few guys on the basketball team, and really my level of injuries up high, C7, T1 at the bottom of my neck, and I've got a little weakness in my hands. And after talking to my rehab counselor at the university, and he heard my background, my sports background, he said, you need a sport. The only thing going on at the time was basketball. So I was good for a pick or maybe a hook shot or something. It wasn't really my sport, but he said, if you will join the team, I'll get you a sports chair, which was just a lighter chair, better balanced, an axle position that would move my back wheels forward a little bit, make the front end lighter. And then a couple guys on the team were getting involved in track. And I met a guy from Colorado that said, hey, there's other things going on. He had the same level of injury as myself. So that was helpful. And most of the people that I went through rehab were lower paraplegic, so I had or higher, much higher quads. So when I found another guy that was same level, and he was into archery and track, field swimming, he was a pentathlete, and so he got me going. We became competitors, and then I saw that a lot of people were into jogging and running, and I thought, why not?
It's, and just to back up just a little bit. So you said you are a quadriplegic, and for a lot of people out there, a lot of people think, you break your neck and you can't move your arms at all. You can't move your hands, but you said you're a lower quadriplegic. You broke.
Like this one hand, this finger here comes up slower.
But also the big determining factor is that you have triceps, right? So that pushing motion, that's the difference between a lower quadriplegic and a higher quadriplegic, where generally they don't have. I mean, we can have more severe hand issues and things like that, but that's one of the big determining factors, especially with regard to classification on the track, is do you have triceps? Do you not have triceps? So you started playing basketball. What happened to get you into a race? So you said this guy was doing archery and track and these things, and was he the guy who got you into your first race? And what was the distance?
Into my first track race, and then I could see what people were doing, but knew that I could do a lot. I could do longer distances, and to do a track race, you need to go to a track event, and that's only once or a couple times a year. Some in Denver, some in California. Nothing really here. Things were starting to come together, but my first year being in the chair, I wasn't driving a car. That came a little later. I just didn't have a vehicle at the time, so I was pushing everywhere I was going. And I'm coming from a skateboard background, right? Mm-hmm. And surfing, grew up on the West Coast, so open space was something that made me feel good. And I just thinking, hey, could I push a marathon? The marathon was my first road race.
Marathon was your first road race. That's the place to start.
Yeah.
And which marathon was this?
It was the Desert News Marathon. So it's a big race here in Utah. It's on our state holiday, Pioneer Day, 24th of July.
How was it to get into the race? Was it hard to get into the race?
Yeah, when I went to register, they were kind of taken, saying, "Oh, yeah, that would be really cool if you could do something like that." But then I thought, wait a minute. This is a tax certified race. It's for legged people. You're on wheels. Maybe not. It might mess up the certification of the race and that sort of thing, what they are willing to allow in. And so they said, well, we'll let us look into it. So there was a big question mark up until a day or two before the race. They heard about Bob Hall out in Boston doing the Boston Marathon in his chair, and then they called me back up and said, no problem in Boston with Bob Hall. So
well, that's it. And interesting too with that, right? Because Bob Hall wanted to get into the race, and the legend, at least, is that the race director said to him, if you go sub 3 hours, you'll get the official T-shirt.
Yeah, there's a motivation.
Yeah. 2:58, and you were in effectively the chair that you were using to play basketball,
right?
And how fast did you go? And these are different classes as well. So you've got the paraplegic class, which is Bob Hall, who's actually a walking para kind of
polio
kind of thing. I don't know exactly what his disability is, and how long did it take you?
It was just under 6 hours. It was like 5:58, something like that. Yeah. We're talking about long mountain grades going up, some steep hills. We're talking about mountain roads, paved roads, and then there was the rest periods, long areas of coasting, 3 or 4 miles where I'm coasting to, and flat areas. So beautiful course. Starts up in the mountains, you see wildlife, and it comes through canyon, a few homes, and then into the city, and then down a parade route. So the fact that it was this race, it had a lot of publicity. A lot of people saw it, and that's what the racer directors were thinking too. You know, this is a great thing. People ought to see it. And so they started me 3 hours before the runner started. And I started in the dark with a little Carmen Ghia behind me and the lights on so I could see the road and that. And then concerned about heat also,
Right.
being in the middle of summer.
So were you hooked?
Well, you're talking about the Salt Lake Marathon. It's changed. Salt Lake Marathon is what is a different race than the Desert News Marathon is.
Right.
So,
Exactly.
Yeah, two different races. You're right. You're right about the Salt Lake Marathon and the Boston being close. But
Yeah.
The Desert News is on our state holiday, Pioneer Day, the 24th of July.
So after you did this race, after you went up and down these huge, I mean, and it's not really, these aren't really hills, these are mountains. Were you hooked after 6 hours of going back and forth and thought, this is exactly what I want to do?
Yeah, because it was such a great feeling of accomplishment, you know, that I could do that. And then all the support, you know, people around, it made a connection. Now I was joining the running community. And so every weekend there was a road race or someplace I could go. And then other guys in chairs got involved, and people started to, you know, there was a one difference about the chair that I used in my first marathon. You mentioned basketball chair. I did have pneumatic wheels that were on the front that aren't on the basketball chair.
So pneumatic meaning that you pump them with air like your regular air tires. So the front casters actually had air. Okay. And what was the reaction of the running community when you guys were you guys embraced by the running community?
Oh yeah. Absolutely. People would talk about your times, and you know, we started looking at running magazines to find out where the courses would be, and then the social event afterwards, and the award ceremony, and you have time to talk and visit.
I didn't experience this time of the, you know, of the history of wheelchair racing. There's actually a Facebook club, History of Wheelchair Racing, and you've been contributing a lot of photos to that. And it's interesting for me. My first racing chair was actually a 3-wheeled racer. So that was 3-wheeled racer with a brake, and we were still using like friction tape on the push ring, because it's really more of a friction kind of thing, the way you're pushing. But you saw so much of the evolution of these chairs. You went from this first chair to how did that progression work? What happened?
I think a number of athletes that were running their chairs on the track thought of ways, and there was rules governing the chairs, because they wanted the chairs to be equal for everybody. So not somebody had an advantage over others. So kids are starting to work under the rules. Nothing in the rules says about putting more sag in your upholstery so you can sit back further and lighten up the front, you know. So all these things that were evolving actually made the chairs safer and allowed us to go faster. So,
but you still had to have like push handles on the back of your chair.
Yeah.
So that somebody could actually push you. I'm assuming that nobody was pushing you as you're on the track or you're on the road. You had to have a footrest. I have a friend who is an amputee, a bilateral amputee, who said, according to the rules, I had to have a footrest, even though I didn't have any feet. I still had to have a footrest, which is what you're talking about, sort of the level playing field of. But what did you see as, what was the big breakthrough when did it happen that you went, oh, like this is the coolest thing? Or I mean, you probably thought that even when you got your basketball chair, when you got that first basketball chair, like this is a great piece of equipment. But was there a light bulb moment where you said, oh, this is really happening now?
I think when I had a chair built from the ground up, frame and everything, that was designed specifically for road racing
Mhm.
or for racing, a racing chair instead of an everyday chair that was modified to work better on the road. I'm also, getting my tires and that from a bicycle shop, so that got the bicycle people interested in what I was doing and saying, "Hey, there's a thing about toe in and toe out, we're about making your wheels so they're working efficiently, and things that hadn't really thought about before."
Right.
So you get some connection with the bicycle community because we're getting components from the bicycle shop. They get interested. I had a that was making chairs, and I got one of his chairs. He also made an everyday
Who was
chair.
that? Can you repeat it? Sorry, you dropped out for a
Dean
second there.
Dean Barrett. Dean Barrett
Okay.
and Louis Bear were starting to make chairs, aluminum chairs, not the chrome moly, lighter metal, and getting rid of the cross piece, of course, not needed. I think it was Jeff Menabaker that came up with a quick release, an axle, so you could pop the wheels on and off if you need to transport the chair or you need a change of tire or wheel. And much lighter, more rigid. And so prior to that, my race chair was my everyday chair. It's like your everyday legs are your running legs, sort of thing. But then once we got a chair separate for sport, it made it a lot easier, and the time started to drop. Then we got rid of the front two wheels and just put one wheel out in front. So I think it was Canadians that came up with that.
With the three-wheeled wheelchair.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay, which is what we see today, and some of the people watching might well have seen the Paralympics on television, which it's almost space age to a certain extent now, where everything is so streamlined and aerodynamic helmets and with the form-fitted gloves that are made with plastic that basically are like cast kind of material, like you'd cast your hand. And it's pretty amazing to see where it's gone right now. But you were in that period of time where it sounds like a lot of the technology and a lot of the changes were happening on an individual kind of basis, that the people who were racing were also the people who were manufacturing these chairs and saying, okay, well, how about if I change this? And talking about camber, you talked a little bit about camber and toe in and toe out. And camber is when your wheels are on an angle. And what that does is it allows you, it gives you a little bit bigger platform when you're going around the turns, and actually makes the chair want to turn when it gets into the turn. But the toe in and toe out is that those wheels, especially when they're on that angle, need to be exactly parallel. So that if they're pointed in at all, that's toe in. If they're pointed out, that's toe out. And what happens is they're scrubbing on both points. And so is that the way it worked though, with having all of the people who were involved in it, who were the ones who were tweaking it and changing it and going, okay, I'm going to dump my upholstery here and this is going to work well. And then you as a fellow competitor go, well, that looks pretty good. Maybe I'll try that. Is that how this works? Sort of like the garage engineers?
Yeah, I think getting people together and they can see what each other are doing and then feed off of that. I think in terms of the able-bodied world, you take like Chris Peterson, who was a friend of George Murray, who was in a wheelchair, and he was doing furniture, bikes, and got involved. Dean, the guy that built my chair, was actually pushing chairs, so he knew a little bit about it, interested, in that. Growing up surfing, those that made the best surfboards are those that actually surfed. So,
what was that community like? It seems like, because it can be so isolating, right? I think that being in a wheelchair, oftentimes the rest of your the rest of your world, nobody else is like you. But you go to an event like this and suddenly there are more people like you. What was that community? Because in a lot of ways, it's almost like you guys just came out of doors for the first time.
Yeah, I was inspired by those that I saw competing, that were a couple of years out in front of me. And I think that feeling of inclusion, people taking the time to say, hey, I notice you're new around here. This is what we're doing. How are you? And if someone is in the same walk of life as yourself and maybe a couple of years ahead of you and so willing to share and to help each other. So absolutely.
And it worked with the road racers as well, right? That after doing the marathon, you got a little bit of publicity and
They start looking into training, what a runner does to train.
right. Exactly. But then you said that there were road races that were actually flying you places to come compete in their race. Like you were a wanted commodity instead of a hassle for their race.
Mm-hmm. Well, what's going on at this time too is inroads were being made in terms of laws that buildings have to have ramps, and we have to have curb cuts. We need to make some concessions for people that are different. And a lot of this work was done by Judy Newman, who's also in a wheelchair out of New York, and got laws like the 504 that you have to make concessions for people that are different. So this integration was going on. We started to push marathons. And so cities that were trying to get curb cuts and trying to get politicians to pass these laws saw that having someone in their towns, in their cities marathon, got them in the public view, did more for curb cuts and handicap housing than anything else. So that was the reason I'm getting calls from like Phoenix or Cincinnati and places and say, hey, come do our marathon. Fort Wayne, Indiana in the early years was a big one too. They used to fly us out and put us up. And
were you surprised? What was it like the first time when somebody called you up and said, hey, John, we want to fly you to our place?
You felt like an elite athlete, and it was nice to be able to brush shoulders with top runners and respect and consideration. And prize money came into the vogue, and that helped to support your sport. So it was great.
Is it what was your view of training? What how did training work in your mind?
One of the reasons I'm in a wheelchair is sleep deprivation, not having enough sleep,
Mm-hmm.
and getting in a car accident. So when I was waiting for some wheels to be trued at a bike shop, there were some training logs there in the magazine stand. And I picked up one, and the first thing it had in there was hours slept. I said, okay, this is for me. Because I'm working part-time, I'm going to school, I'm married, I've got a kid on the way, I've got this sport that I'm totally passionate about. I'm burning the candle at both ends a lot of the time. And I found that, like, when I was teaching in the classroom, that if I didn't get at least 7 hours of sleep, I'd get a cold or I'd get sick from the kids. So it was important for me to log in how many hours I slept every night. And then other things, miles I pushed, weight training, swimming, all those other things, cross training. I was fortunate to do that early on, and I've logged all my races and my workouts, and I've kept all those books, and so I'm able to learn from what I did previously, and it's helped me. And I thought, okay, once I get my medals really wasn't the main thing. It was more about competing with my friends, being with my friends, and traveling, meeting new people, and that. Well, when I thought, after meeting a lot of my goals,
Right.
And I thought, okay, I'm logging to meet those goals to help me. And then once I stopped, I'd have a really good run, and I found myself getting a pencil and writing it on the garage floor. And I said, I got to keep writing these down,
So you'd write it on the garage. So are they still there on your garage floor?
No, no. It was in that transition of thinking I can go on without this, and then realizing that it's ingrained in me. And I say if you do the same thing for 28 days in a row at the same time, same place, it becomes a habit.
That you create a habit doing the same thing 28 days in a row, right? Exactly. Yeah.
So it's useful even now today.
Yeah, I would imagine. So what's the feeling? What does it feel like when you're out there on the road? You do a lot of your training early in the morning too, right?
Right.
And what is it, what's your connection with your environment? What's your connection with, are you looking to go out and punish yourself and really hurt, or how does it how do you approach it?
Well, you have hard days and you have easy days. In my log, you take your pulse when you're lying down, and then take it again when you sit up,
Mm-hmm.
and it tells you whether you should have if the beats are really far, then that should be tell you to rest. If they're close, you can go hard. I want to go hard every day because I just enjoy it so much. And they wrote an article in the Wheelchair Sports magazine, and I said something like, I became one with the wheel. And then I got teased about that. But I really felt like I was one unit. The chair and myself became one piece. And it took me about 2 years time to really get comfortable in the chair, feeling that was, a part of me. And I had it mastered by that point, And I think I remember as an art school, I was painting late at night, and I turned my chair and wheeled back up across the room and then turned around again. And I realized I hadn't really touched my wheels to turn around. And I didn't feel like every time I met somebody, I had to say, "Oh, I'm John Brewer, and this is the reason I'm in a wheelchair." It was just me. And I think I became more of that on the long wheel days, like going for an hour, 2 hours, and get into that rhythm and breathing. And it's almost really, I can say it's a spiritual experience. A lot of great thoughts and epiphanies would come to me. Sometimes I listen to music while I'm going, and a little voice would say, "Turn off the music." I've got a deep thought for you. You need to consider this. But I do miss that. Yeah.
Is that something that you share with other people when you're introducing somebody to the sport? Do you talk about, hey, this is part of what happened for me? I mean, sure, the medals are important, but getting out there and the spiritual awakening that I experienced all by myself. Well, it is all by yourself because you and your chair are one. So it's you and your chair and your environment. And
Well, there's people that get that in team sports. There's a great spirit in team sports when you're working together as a unit. They talk about hitting a wall when you do marathon. They say it's 20 miles. For me, it's the 23rd mile mark. So when there's things that are hard for me in life, I just think to myself, "Oh, I'm on the 23rd mile mark." And I've been there a lot, and you meet yourself and you have to push through the discomfort, of being there, meeting your goal. And everything gets real simple and nothing else matters. It's very purifying. You get into that, what athletes call the zone.
right.
Yeah, it's a special place.
Yeah. And you're talking about that when you're hitting the wall, that it becomes really pure and really simple. And it's just a matter of just continuing to go forward. That's it.
When you start, you're looking way down the road. And then as you get closer and closer, you're saying, "Can I make it to the next curve?" Your vision is a little narrow. But it's just a great lesson to life. You do that over and over again. It becomes, when something is repetitious, as that becomes like a mantra.
Yeah.
And it's great for the body, great for the mind, great for the soul.
You went from the 6-hour marathon and the Deseret News Marathon to being the first quadriplegic to go sub 2 hours in Boston.
Right.
What was that like? I mean, that's I mean, you look at it, it's a third of the time
Mm.
that it had taken you in that first marathon. It's 4 hours shorter, which is, a sixth of a day, 17% of the day. So, I mean, that's a big chunk of time, right?
Yeah, we're also talking about 14 years, and we're talking about a great deal of uh, evolutions taking place with the instrument that I'm using with the race chair, and training and getting your body to do that. Yeah, I mean, it's a great feeling of accomplishment because a lot of us were trying to do that when it got down to the last mile, and I knew I was going to do that. It's just a totally euphoric feeling.
Was that your Roger Bannister kind of moment when Roger Bannister was the first guy to break the 4 minute mile, to be the first quadriplegic to break a 2 hour marathon? Did that sort of feel in your mind like stacking somewhere in history?
I don't think I really thought that way, but I know a lot of my European racing friends and my Canadian racing friends were all trying to do that. And I knew that they would be happy for me. And once that was done, it seemed like that very quickly that that record got broken over and over again. So it seems like once something is done and people hear about it, it makes it easier for others to get that done also. And then people will question the course. Boston can be a really fast course if you get it on the right conditions, So I don't know. So you've got those type of courses that rock and roll and those that are completely flat. But then, I was totally on my own, and a lot of guys will be drafting with Perez, and we'll get those times too. So, I mean, a lot of goals. When you come down to it, it's just personal, really. It was fun to get that recognition.
Exactly. It was fun to be the first one and then to see it keep getting dropped. Part of what you had to do as well was you were responsible for some of the changing of the technique, at least in this country, right? You're going to a backhanded technique.
Right.
What was your role in that?
Just a good receiver of the gift. I had a Swedish friend that it was pushing that way, and our times were really close. Actually, he's a little higher quad than I am, but
Okay.
because he had a better technique, we were very, very even in our races, very, very close. So when you have a 3 or 4 hour race and you end up right together with our second, apart from each other, it's very fine. We became very close very quickly. And so after one of the races up in Minnesota, in Bloomington, Kaiser Roll, during the social, he gave me a pair of his gloves and said, "Here, beat the Paris." So I took that home with me, and I would train with my regular gloves in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I'd take his technique and I'd work with it. And I noticed after about a month's time, I was really going a lot faster with his push technique. And
Can you describe the technique?
yeah, I'm actually coming in to the push ring with my fist. And then as I come down, I roll my hand, the back of my hand, into the underside of the ring, the push ring, and flick off. Like in my martial arts, this is really strong. Back this way. So, and it took some pressure off the shoulders too. And it's that little flick at the back of the hand, at the end of your hand as it comes off. So instead of coming through here, which breaks the wrist, and just this, and high quads will have like what they call a tenagesis, will pull the wrist back like that. So this becomes strong. It's the last muscle to go. So that's help in the push, that little flick at the end. It's like pushing off the ball of your foot if you're a runner.
Exactly. So in a lot of ways, this is exactly the opposite of the way that we assume people push a wheelchair, right? Because pushing a wheelchair, you grab on to the push ring and you move the push ring forward. And this is the opposite, where you're not actually grabbing, you're just using that friction between the glove and the push ring to give you that purchase to accelerate the wheel. It's kind of like, in some ways, if you take like a bike wheel, like the front wheel of your bike, and pull it off the ground and go and try to accelerate that wheel. Well, it's not on the ground, and you don't grab onto it and try to push it. You actually just kind of pat it. And in some ways, that's kind of similar to what you were doing with this backhanded stroke, which took you, as I read, from 3:19 to 2:30 for the marathon. Does that sound accurate?
Yeah, I have to go back and look at my log and see. It was in 85, July of 75 when I put those gloves. So I have to look at my fall races in 85 and
Right.
compare them to 84, the year before, and see how that measures out. And if I have the same chair and didn't make a chair change at that time.
That's one of the hard parts, right? Is sort of to keep this scientific and actually just change one element to be able to pinpoint. That's what made this difference, as opposed to changing the chair and changing.
Yeah, well, there's a lot of things like I started weightlifting, at a certain time, started swimming more for flexibility. Also with the backhand, you're extending the length of your arm too.
Mhm.
So it's a little longer.
You were the top marathoner for a significant period of time, the top quadriplegic marathoner, and really approaching Seoul in 1988. So Seoul was the first time, I mean, the first modern time, right, that the Paralympics were held on the same venue as the Olympics. I mean, back in 1960, they had both been in the same venue, but really they'd kind of gone separate ways, and this was coming back. And you said, approaching that winning the gold medal was not necessarily your goal as much as breaking the world record. There, you had that supreme confidence that you were the guy to beat, but you really wanted to break the world record. How did that race go? How did that race in Seoul go? Because you often plan your training for one particular moment, right?
Yeah, I think under the circumstances, it was pretty good. To race is one thing. To travel and race is another thing. Marathon's like the crowning event for the Olympic Games. It's the last event. And so back then, they did not have a marathon trial. You couldn't get on the Paralympic team as a marathoner. You have to qualify as a track racer. And those are two different sports. And so I think the pain for me was having to learn to run the track so I could even be there to push the marathon. In 2000, it changed, and I was able to be on the Paralympic team without doing any track work at all. I took first place in the trials, which was in LA. It was a rainstorm.
The LA Marathon, right?
Yeah. So I had done the 800, the 1500, and the 5000. But I crashed, which saved me a little bit in the 5,000. And then there's just so much hype. It's almost like, well, the first time you did Boston, there's just so much hype with it, the excitement and the adrenaline that it pumps, So I was probably a little tired and fatigued too from all the track racing and all the hype and everything. But I love the marathon so much, and it really, really worked well for me. I was chasing a Canadian who's hill climbing better than any of us at the time. And I was looking for him in the turnaround, and I never saw him. He actually ducked out and had to do a repair to reposition his feet. So I passed him without knowing I had passed him. So the whole time I was driving and looking for him. And so it was, it was really, really like, oh,
looking for him, but you couldn't see him.
If I was way out in front, I might have taken a little easier. But I was driving so harder than maybe I could have done, but or I shouldn't have been driving that hard in the middle of the race.
But that's some of what you hope for too, right? I mean,
it was just different. Everyone has a different experience. People say, "Oh, it was rainy, it was tough, it was hard." Did you do that marathon, Chris? Were you in that?
That one in Seoul? No. That was before my time. I was still walking when you were doing that marathon in Seoul.
Okay, so you are the second generation. truly.
I am a second generation. Yes, I missed all this fun and craziness, the long hair and the.
I'd say I helped to pioneer the sport, to start it.
That's a big deal. That's a huge deal. And it's for those of us who followed behind you, it's I feel like it's a debt of gratitude for us, that we really, it was really easy for me. I was able to go to road races, and I was able just to sign up for road races. At a lot of races, there was prize money, which made it nice, especially when you're spending $100 on a tire or whatever, and you blow a tire and think, okay, well, that's a lot of money, but at least I won a little bit of money, so maybe I can break even or something. And those, there's a huge debt of gratitude for those who followed behind you. Yeah, I mean that to me. So to finish this race, you want to finish your Seoul story.
Yeah, right. So my competitor from Sweden, Jan-Over Mattsson, he finally caught me. He had me in sight. I didn't know he was back there. So he was running me down, and I got on the track, and my coach thought I had a flat tire. I was just out. I mean, I was just happy to get to the stadium, and he was driving down on me. And so it got to the last 100 yards, and he was coming on me. And so I just had to totally uncork and just give it everything I got. And I just beat him by a half a wheel length. So it was pretty exciting. He was the one that urged me to go international with my racing and get on my country's sports team so that I could be there. I wouldn't, if it hadn't been for his encouragement and also giving me his push technique. So it was just super high to finish alongside of him.
Did you think that you were racing for second and third still?
Yeah.
That is kind of funny. What happened when somebody told you that you actually won?
Oh, it was great, but just to be there in that moment, it wasn't about like, oh, I gotta have first or I'll be upset. I'd already picked up 2 silvers, and I just ran out of real estate on the 15. It was a second between me and Jeff Worthington. It was really close. But for me, win or lose, it doesn't matter. I'm still with my lover, and that's pushing. I can go home and I can push what we call long flow distance, LSD. And it is that in that way. It's really mind opening and opens up your heart and gets you breathing deep, and it's just a wonderful thing. And you're outdoors, and it just feels good.
For Sydney in 2000, you did not anticipate making the team. You weren't planning on it. You went to the LA Marathon and you won the marathon, right?
Oh yeah, I wanted to do that, and there was younger guys coming up. And so as I'm fading back and these guys are coming up, we kind of met in the middle, and I had a lot of really close competitions right there. It was really quite fun. And so here in Utah, we watch the weather, our ski season and all of that. We watch the weather. Southern California, or maybe other parts of the country, maybe aren't as careful in watching the weather. But I could see that there was a big storm pushing the West Coast. And so at the last minute, I just grabbed my cross-country ski jacket that I use in the winter. It fits close to my arms. And I just grabbed that. And when I got out of the hotel room to go to the start line, it was not only raining, but it was very cold. So I went back and I grabbed that jacket. And what happened about 18 miles a mark, I picked off 3 guys had hyperthermia. And that's how I finished first. Just smarter. I was already 50 years old, so they called me up and said, you finished first in LA, which was our marathon trial. So can you go to Sydney?
And what did you say?
I'll check with my school district because I'm teaching the public schools. And they said, yeah, we're excited about it. Go. We'll give you that time off. And so it was really a fun time because that's the only thing I had to focus on, and gave me opportunity to visit a lot of events and visit other parts of the village and see all the beaches. Where in Seoul, I had an event every day. And so I would event and go back and rest, and I didn't get to see some of the other sports. So it was great being in Sydney. And I ended up finishing 6th out of 9 in my class. I was happy with that. It was very, very tough course. Were you in Sydney?
I was in Sydney. I did not race the marathon. No.
200 or something. I was looking.
I did 100, 200, 400, 800, and both relays, 4x1 and 4x4. So it was a busy time, and I was sick. So
Oh,
Sydney, I've thoroughly enjoyed Sydney, but it was a tough time. But it sounded like, from reading, it sounded like that winning in LA gave you a gift of being able to train and being able to focus. Is that really the way that it worked? Is that okay, now I can go train because hey, I'm on the team, I've got to do it, and it gave you what you really wanted to do? Is that how it is? It was
oh,
that the
kind of like a carrot. Yeah, you learn to get sharp. You sharpen for that. Absolutely. It's like that carrot. The next race is that kind of that motivation to do well. So you look good with your friends. You don't want to be left behind. You don't want to be the last guy, and everyone's saying, "Hey, what happened?" You know.
one of the things that we did that had a profound effect was actually moving the axle of the rear wheels forward. So we had a four-wheeled vehicle that I used to climb Mount Kilimanjaro, and we moved the axle probably 4 to 6 inches forward, and the axle then ended up almost the way it is in an everyday chair, where it was directly below my hips. And what that did, one, it makes it a little tippier, right? And a lot of people were looking at it thinking, you don't want to do that because you're going to get on something steep and you're going to tip over. But it improved traction, and the traction, because all of my weight was going directly into the wheel, and so the traction was just that much better. And looking at that, looking at changing your fitness, climbing the mountain, for me, I had to turn myself into an engine. I couldn't, sometimes in wheelchair racing, you'll get with a rhythmic stroke where it's 1, 2, 3, take a rest, 1, 2, 3, take a rest. And because it's more anaerobic, it's more ballistic in some ways. And this, all I could do was just maintain RPMs and roll over things. And my arms, actually, I had to do measurements for some compression clothing, and my arms were actually an inch smaller in circumference than they were when I was racing,
Interesting.
because I just became more of an engine.
Yeah.
We're getting close to the end, and I want to talk, because you've talked a little bit about the art side of things, being an art teacher, being an artist. I think that being a wheelchair athlete in a lot of ways was art for you. You've talked about the spiritual side of things. Are people more surprised when they meet you as a quadriplegic that you are an artist, or that you're a wheelchair racer, if they know nothing about you?
I can't tell you what other people think. I don't know.
No, but do they tell you that there's
I guess it's what they're exposed to. What they. I'm trying to see all sides of a person. I don't. The thing I'm most proud of is that I'm a father and a grandfather, and 4 children, 6 grandchildren. A lot of people just like, oh well, a lot of people are doing that, but to do it well, is the thing that I'm proud about. And I had an interview when I taught for 30 years. I retired, and I loved it so much I rehired. And I remember being interviewed, and I just felt like when you're in a room with new people, in the back of their minds, they're wanting to know, why is this guy in a wheelchair? You know. So I told the people that were interviewing me for this job, there's a group of them, and I said, do you know why I'm in a wheelchair? They said, no. And so I told them, and they said, oh, we're so sorry. And I said, well, I went on to the Paralympics and I won a gold medal in the marathon. I said, oh, that's great. That's a wonderful thing. But I said then after that, but my best work is in the classroom. And that's the way I feel. And it's something that people don't see. It's not as bright and shiny as a work that's in a gallery that I've done, or what people see on TV because they saw me finishing the marathon or medal like that. But some of those personal things that I've been able to do, coming from the strength of accomplishing some of the races and that sort of things.
Yeah, well, I think you did. And the thing is that it sounds like you were particularly successful in working with some at-risk kids.
Yeah.
Did did your experience, did your accident, did being in a wheelchair, did being a racer, did that help you connect with the kids at risk, or did it give you some credibility?
I think it gave them an experience that's out of the ordinary. So that gets them their attention. Well, here's this guy, and he's doing this. And sure, it's got to be inspiring. I know even as a wheelchair person in my first year, when I saw people uh, playing basketball, you know, without any legs or missing a few fingers, or really, really inspiring. So it's nice to be able to turn around and do that for others.
I'll let you get out on this question. So you said that you're most proud of being a father and being a grandfather,
A husband.
being a husband as well. You
Mhm.
hadn't mentioned that, but I'm glad that you did. And is there one nugget of a message that you pass on to your children and your grandchildren, and possibly to your wife, and maybe she passes back to you? I don't know. Is there something, a message that you want to, that you tell them, that you think, hey, this is something important. This is something you need to know.
Yeah, I think integrity is really important. Faith, hope, belief, that you can.
John, thank you so much for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure, and keep doing what you're doing. You're a great example for all of us.
Yeah, the same for you, Chris. I mean, there's times when we've met up at some of the sports expos and you've given me some tips and things that have helped me. So I appreciate that. It's nice to
Well,
be a
sounds
part.
good. Well, I look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks, John.